The West End is an Atlanta neighborhood that can be found just southwest of Castleberry Hill, east of Westview, west of Adair Park, and just north of Oakland City. The West End is often depicted in the news as a crime-ridden neighborhood made up of predominantly African Americans. Such an image is the reason why racial profiling is still used, and also why police violence towards African Americans has become such a public issue.
I guess my mom went to Tech, and before I came to Tech, she was telling me about West End. It was it's a really sketchy area. So,
I've heard it sounds sketchy. So I don't know about it.
I remember when I applied here, my parents were like, "Oh yeah, don't go to the West End or the Bluffs. That's the bad area." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So it's kind of sketchy, I think.
In actuality, the West End is a tight-knit community that has used its rich history and African American culture and its own ties as a community to stimulate gentrification and the renewal of the neighborhood. Gentrification is often spurred by upper-class white citizens who hope to profit off the low housing prices and mask the problems of economically unstable communities. However, the gentrification of the West End has been more successful in creating a welcoming, economically stable, and safe neighborhood as a result of the community members' own involvement in the process.
Okay. This is a relatively new street. West End had gone into a state of decline after World War II, and mainly in the 50s, because Lenox Square was springing up, all the suburbs, there was a housing shortage. So these old homes required a lot of money to maintain, and the people who had them, who were still white here then because it was segregated, they left. The ones that had any money, they went to the newer homes. The whites moving in didn't have as much money, and they could not maintain the homes, and they went down because of that.
Tony Kehoe remembered when houses were torn down and replaced with parks in the West End as part of urban renewal.
They told you what was going to happen, and they just leveled homes. Okay, so blocks were vacant for years. You can still see this being vacant 40, 50 years later.
This type of gentrification oftentimes puts a financial strain on the members of the neighborhood, forcing them to leave. The east side of Atlanta is one such example. In present-day neighborhoods such as Eastlake and Kirkwood, quote, rising property values have displaced older, long-term black residents as middle and upper-income whites bid up property values. Frank Edwards, an Atlanta resident, described it as, quote, the white folk moved out and are now paying anything to move back. Kirkwood, for example, has had a 275% increase in housing prices over the past 10 years, according to the article in The Double-Edged Sword of Gentrification in Atlanta. After urban renewal failed, the West End turned to the community in order to restore its image. Members of the community began to make strides. Beginning in the 1960s, buppies, similar to yuppies, began to populate the area. These buppies were black, urban, middle-class citizens that began to move into the neighborhood of the West End.
and what is that?
That was purchased by a man in the 70s, and he turned it into a museum of African American folklore and art.
Carl Benz, a West End resident who attended the same high school that Tony Kehoe did, became the first African American basketball player for Georgia Tech in 1971. He was the leading rebounder and fourth leading scorer, according to the National Association of Basketball Coaches. Yet another stride was found in Ken King, a West End resident and a legendary football player for Georgia Tech, used his passion for his community and went into the real estate business, striving to improve communities instead of displacing them. He then later donated $25,000 to build a golf course for the community of the West End. West End has also been dedicated to preserving the historic value, having restrictions on how houses can look and what can and cannot be torn down. In addition, a West End neighborhood planning unit exists as a way for community members to get together and address zoning issues and land use. Today, the West End can be seen as a predominantly black community that has been gentrified by the dedication of its own community members. The community members have stimulated the gentrification while a variety of outside resources, such as the local government and Michael Dobbins, a Georgia Tech professor guiding a group of students in their projects of city planning, have worked with the community to enhance and to listen to its own needs instead of simply covering up the image. The West End has evolved into an Atlanta neighborhood that displays the power of gentrification and demonstrates it as a process that enables a neighborhood to progress and a community to form.